Hi guys, it's Blackie.
And Bear.
And welcome to, what is this, old Wayz 39?
39.
39, wow. So, today's topic, I saw I want to get Bear's input on this. But I was seeing somebody who's kind of fairly famous on one of the little YouTube shorts. And they were pointing out about the world changing and how for hundreds of years we used horses. And that in 1900, the only way you went was either by some sort of horse locomotion or walking, riding a riverboat, riding on a boat on the ocean that was either steam or sail, or a steam train. That was the only way you went anywhere of any consequence.
Pretty much.
And then by World War II, definitely by the end of it, horses, stuff like that, even in the remote sections of the country, they just weren't used that much because surplus vehicles from World War I and World War II provided that. Made we could afford a surplus vehicle for a lot of farms and stuff like that. But that technology is gone. What he was pointing out was this entire huge industry that was made around it of the blacksmith, the saddle makers, the buggy builders, the wagoners, the livery stables, all like that. And what he was pointing out is that once we make the transition from what is now gasoline power over to whatever's next, be it electric cars or self-powered cars or whatever, that this driving thing that we take for granted today will probably go away, that it'll probably eventually be vehicles that drive themselves, that you just get into and it takes you to where you say go, and you won't know how to drive. But that sounds so alien, and God, I wouldn't want to do that, but great-granddaddy felt that way about using a truck instead of mules to transport cargo.
Well, it's funny you should say that.
Mm-hmm.
In 1925, my granddaddy and my great-granddaddy put in the crops that year, and they each bought them a Model T Ford.
Mm-hmm.
It cost them $500 out of the Sears and Roebuck catalog, and the closest place they could get it delivered was Troy. So they went up there, one of my uncles and the two of them went up there, and Granddaddy drove his back by himself, and my uncle drove my great-granddaddy back, and he never did learn how to drive the silly thing. He had this brand new Model T Ford sitting in the driveway of his house.
Yeah.
And never learned how to drive it. He had it. He died about 10 or 12 years later, but he never learned how to drive that Model T. He had kids to drive them.
I remember hearing a family story on my mother's side of the family of someone in the family getting a car that there was a debt owed to them, and the fella couldn't pay the debt, and so he had a Model T or whatever it was, and told him he could have the Model T, and the family member didn't know how to drive or nothing like that, so he went up there and he hooked his team of mules to it and pulled it home. Walking along, like you'd pull a wagon, he couldn't figure out how to ride on it. But he just used his mules to pull it because he couldn't figure out how this thing worked. But it was, you paid me with this and I'll figure out how to sell it. But it was such new technology to the time, they didn't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
But now, looking at that for today in the modern times, we take for granted that, well, cars like we know it and trucks and airplanes like we know it, that's the way it's going to be. But, our great-granddaddy and that's what they thought about horses and mules. So times will change, things will get different, but whenever it goes that way, just like we're talking about delivery stables and everything, they lost all that technology,
Well, they didn't lose the technology. They lost the knowledge to use the technology.
you and I were talking before we turned on the camera, and everything was, when was the last time you saw an oxen? People used oxen as well as mules and horses for heavy farm work and stuff like that, but you did it as part of a reenactment song. I actually remember some very poor people that had some when I was an early teenager. But that was an old ox, and that was an old farmer over here, Elva, back off in the country, that still had one, and he didn't plow the garden. What he did was, he was using it down there in the swampy areas, and he was pulling stumps and stuff like that with them.
Used to, but even today, there are a few diehards, loggers, that use mules to pull logs out, and they actually get better results pulling with ox.
Yeah.
And there's a few hardcore loggers out here in the world, particularly up in the mountains north of here.
Some place where it's so stiff, it isn't practical to put a vehicle in here.
Yeah, you can't put they go in places vehicles will not go.
You know.
And they use mule teams and yokes of oxen to pull the logs out and do it very successfully. Mm-hmm. I mean, when you get ready to feed an ox, stake him out there in the pasture.
Yeah.
He'll feed himself. When he's ready to go back to work, hook him back up to the yoke and go.
It's one of the things that we take for granted because of our background, but I can remember being in high school, and there was a teacher, and we were talking about history for some reason, and there was back in them days they did slide shows and stuff like that. They did a slide show, and it was showing a painting that had been made sometime in the early 1800s or whatever, and it was a little bitty old stream, and it was being forded by a team of oxen, and this young boy leading the team of oxen. And the teacher said, that oxen are now extinct.
Oops.
And us country boys and all kind of looked at each other like, and finally I remember, ma'am, and she looked at me and said, "What do you think an oxen is?" She said, "Well, they're extinct. They don't exist anymore." Ma'am, have you ever heard of a baby oxen? Or a mama or a daddy oxen? Trying to hint at her, and she didn't get it, and finally some of the country boys on the far side just cracked up. I went, "Ma'am, an oxen is just a castrated bull cow. You determine, I'm gonna turn him into an oxen, you castrate him early, and you basically make him a pet. You put him up close to the house, you handle him every day, you get him used to people, you put a harness on him, you train him like you do a goat or something like that, so it's half pet, half work animal, as opposed to something you just leave in the field. And so it's a cow. So cows are not extinct. We just don't use oxen. But, I bet you if times get tough, we can figure it out again,
Did you get a good grade for that class?
I don't think she respected my pointing out that what she said was not the brightest thing. But then again, she was born and raised in Birmingham, Alabama, and not spent a lot of time in the country. So
Yeah. That reminds me, do you remember way back at the beginning, like 38 episodes ago, when I was doing a book by profile book by Eric Sloan, with old tools and
Right, yeah.
Okay. Well, their beast of burden on the farm at the beginning of that book, the name of the book escapes me right now, but it's by Eric Sloan, Secrets of America Past. That's what it is. For the first several chapters of that book, which are Noah Blake's diary, he has an ox. He works the ox every day, and the ox is pulling stumps, and it's moving bridge timbers, and they're building barns with it. I mean, this was a
Beast of burden?
it was a beast of burden, but it was also a cheap source of power. And right behind me, or right in front of us where we're sitting, is a little red belly Ford that's been in lots of our videos as window dressing. That ox and that tractor would pull about the same amount of stuff.
And a big ox was about the size of them
How big
small
ox, big as
tractors.
that tractor?
Ox were huge across the shoulders.
Yeah.
They were big, they were muscular, they were fat, they were well fed.
Yeah, when you were selecting your calf to make an ox, before you cut him, you wanted one with broad shoulders and what are called cat hams. You ever seen the back hips of a cat? Not a lot of meat back there, and that's what you wanted was the bulk up front.
Like a bulldog.
Yeah, and you know the back end you want to be able to push, but you can push very effectively without a whole lot of energy. But that's how you got your ox.
Yeah, but a cow uses its front to pull himself like a cat does,
Yeah.
and the rear end really just keeps him from dragging. So, like in a
You got
horse,
to have something to keep his tail out of the dirt.
right? But I mean, when you look at a horse is exactly opposite. He'll rear up on his front because he's digging in with his back legs.
He's pulling from the back.
He pulls from the back. So you want big draft animals. You wanted big butts, big thighs, not so much up front. But when you look at an ox, it was right opposite. You want him to, he would do like this and dig like a dog pulling.
And you know when you're looking at he brought up the horses. When you look up a good like a Shire or a Clydesdale or what's another good
Shires, Clydesdales, starts with a B.
Belgians.
Belgian, yeah.
You know they've got those really big hocks on the back. They have those really big hips. You know, a Shire horse, a draft horse, will be almost 3 feet wide at the hips. I mean, that's where his motor is at. And like Blackie said, he's pulling from the back. He's not pulling from the front. But they've got a good, well-developed chest on the front end too.
But now that's something to consider. You know, world go to hell. Okay. What technology could we fairly easy resurrect? One of them is oxen. More so than horses or mules, because it's far easier to find a cow, a young bullock, than it is to find a horse or a mule today.
Right.
Really. Everybody's going to be thinking about that. Oh, I want a horse, and etc. Well, for riding, yeah, but if you're looking at a farm or something, an ox would be a better idea, especially in like a 5 or 6 acre small subsistence farm.
Now there is something. The mule. Mules are hybrids between donkeys and horses, and they're sterile. They do not reproduce. And the person who brought the mule, who was the first proponent of the mule to come into the United States, was George Washington. He brought him into Mount Vernon and was very successful raising mules and training them and selling them. I mean, that's how he made a lot of his money.
Well, if you wanted a riding mule, you took something like a quarter horse and crossed it with a burro.
Yeah.
And you got a riding size, light garden mule is what I used to hear them do. But if you needed a big draft animal, then you took like a Clydesdale, a Shire,
Right.
or something like that, and you crossed it with a mule.
Yeah. But now,
That was the hard part.
we're getting a little bit off in the weeds here, but forgive me. You never had a Belgian stallion and a female donkey called a Jenny.
Yeah.
Never do that, because that will kill the
The big one is the mama.
yeah. You want your stud, your male, to be
Go
No,
uphill
sorry,
instead of
I'm sorry.
downhill.
I'm sorry, flip it. You want your stud to be the donkey,
Yeah.
okay? Because the donkey can't carry the Belgian colt, but the Belgian can carry the donkey colt, if that makes sense.
You got to move it up to make it fit.
But I mean, he's spot on. if you'll go back and look at the books written in the era right after the Mexican War up until, I don't know, middle 1880s, you'll see that the preferred animal to take a wagon west was an ox.
It doesn't
Or
stampede as
brace of
easy.
oxen. No,
It don't get spooked as easy. It wants to herd.
yeah.
If it gets scared, it wants to herd up instead of take off running.
Yeah. And if you want to, it's called a brace of oxen. And you're gonna see probably 6 pulling a wagon. Because now you gotta remember, the wagons by themselves, the wagon's empty, the big ones weighed, the prairie schooners, they weighed probably 4,000 pounds empty.
Big, heavy, dense wood.
Big, heavy wagon. And then you're gonna put at least 4,000 to 6,000 pounds of stuff into it to use when you get to your destination. So we're talking about 10,000 pounds of load.
Think about
Quick.
like a U-Haul truck, one of the large ones full. That's about the weight of one of them kind of Stoker wagons loaded to the gills. Because material in those days were not light. And I remember, back in the 70s, there was a TV show that was going around a lot of the old wagon train roads and showing the piles of stuff that had been dumped by these people leaving from the east, and this is all they owned in the world. And they loaded up grandma's piano, the cast iron wash tub. These were expensive things to them. Well, going
And
across,
valuable.
and very valuable, and you got out yonder in the middle of the plains and suddenly that thing wasn't that valuable anymore, and they'd pitch them. And they'd find these piles where these large wagon trains, when they're going to be crossing the river, they'd have to dump extra weight. And it's just amazing at some of the things that these people had hauled out there in sheer weight. But oxen walked at a walking pace that you and I could keep up with. And people forget about the fact that most of the people going west were walking. You know, yeah, your wagon's right there, but that wagon's full.
Yeah.
And so you're walking beside the wagon leading the team of oxen. So
Right. If you want to see a really good example of a fellow working an ox team, take the first 10 minutes of Quigley Down Under.
yeah,
They're going across Australia with a brace of oxen, with actually 2 or 3 pulling this wagon. And you'll see what I'm talking about with this huge wagon and all of the stuff that's crowded into the wagon, to include some people sitting on top of it.
yeah.
But yeah, that's a good example of what to do. Some of the older movies like Centennial, you get into Centennial and they're doing stuff like that.
But that would be a technology we could resurrect, and yet people had goats back in the day especially that were close to urban areas, and you'd have goats that were rigged up to pull goat carts.
Glad you said that. Yeah, go-karts were a viable thing back in the day, particularly with children. If you see the old pictures from like Ireland, where they have the 2-wheeled cart, and you got a man and a wife and the horse going down the road in the cart, it was the same deal with children back and small adults back 100 years ago. Where was I going?
But it was one thing where kids would take it, and that was part of a thing. Let's say your job as a 10-year-old or whatever was to go feed whatever. Well, they're not going to give you a horse. You had a little bitty donkey cart or a dog cart or a goat cart,
Yeah.
same rough size, but it just had, what was pulling it was like a ewe or a goat or even a sheep. I've even seen things where sheep did it. But any kind of farm animal that you could train to just put the harness on, lead on a leash, where it's doing the pulling, you're just actually just guiding it.
Goats are actually making a comeback as beasts of burden. There are several videos available on YouTube of like backcountry hikers who they don't have the facilities for a herd of horses, a remuda of horses, but they've got a room for 5 or 6 goats.
And goats can carry 40, 50 pounds on their back each.
Yeah, you get 4 or 5 goats carrying 40 or 50 pounds apiece, you got 200 pounds of gear moving.
Yeah.
Which is not a bad idea.
And a goat can go anywhere you can walk, and he can eat anything where you stop.
Anything.
Anything. That's the
Anything.
disadvantage of a horse.
Yeah.
Is you've got to bring grain and stuff, and yeah, they will graze a little bit. A mule is better. A mule can eat and digest more things than a horse. And then
Yeah.
a goat is even more so. I mean,
Well, that's what those books, I was talking about the books a minute ago. Your oxen were your first best source of locomotion to get you out west. Next was the mule. And unless you were an outrider and needed to move quick, a scout needed to move quick, you had a mule or you had a horse. And it's like you were saying, horses were like driving Ferraris or Lamborghinis or something like that. They are high-end gas guzzlers.
well, one of the things that my granddaddy told me, and I got to see it one time, he pointed it out, and he was just trying to share a little bit of wisdom of his use. He said, if you'll watch, be it standing up level, looking at a horse running dead at you, and go look at a horse race or something like that. The faster a horse gets, it's like his hooves kind of get a little wild. You watch him, he's kind of like this. It's like he's whipping his hooves. You look at a mule and he's like this. He's like, we run. The horse, it's like he's slinging his feet to the front, and a mule is like doing like this. And that's the reason the mules are considered more sure-footed. It's not, they're landing at odd angles or whatever.
Yeah.
Something coming up lane, a horse seems to come up lane a whole lot more than a mule.
Oh yeah. Like I said, it's a Lamborghini.
Yeah, and having ridden both horses and mules.
Let's see if somebody will let us borrow a Lamborghini. We'll go across the
Yeah, let's go stump jumping.
Yeah, we'll go stump jumping with a Lamborghini.
Yeah.
That sounds like an old Wayz.
You give me, if somebody asked me a couple of years ago, they said, if world had gone to hell and you had to pick, what would you want for a cross-country vehicle to get you from A to B? I said, give me a mule. A well-trained riding mule can feed himself. Anytime you stop to eat, he'll go to eating. You know, he'll drink water just like you do. He eats, he poops. He'll move along. You can easily find grasses and stuff down here to feed him. He'll browse on everything, including pine trees.
They will eat the bark off of a tree.
They will eat the bark literally right in front of you. So
Right
yeah,
off the tree.
just crunch it and start eating it. No problem.
Absolutely. I've seen them eat everything from kudzu to poison ivy.
Here's something for you to do for a little history. Reckless. Reckless is a famous Marine horse that when they got into Korea,
Mule.
was it a mule?
Sergeant Reckless was a mule.
Was it a mule? Okay, I thought it was a small horse. But they got into Korea and they bought it to carry ammunition, and so that you carry the recoilless rifle rounds on it. And the nickname for the recoilless rifle, instead of recoilless rifle, they call it the Reckless. So the mule got the name Reckless. And the stories of this thing, it was so honored by the Marine Corps. When the war was over, they brought it back to America, and it lived out its life, and it was a very hardy little breed and could eat anything.
It was like a Mongolian mule.
Yeah.
Or steppe horse. S-T-E-E-P.
Yeah.
I guess that's how you spell it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was this mule. This horse would get down on its knees and crawl.
Under fire.
Under fire, yeah.
It would go without help. They would simply turn it loose from the ammo dump, and it would go on the trail by itself the 3 miles back to where they were fighting.
To where its gun crew was.
Where its gun crew.
Its gun crew.
And if it got under fire, it would lay down until they stopped shooting, and it'd jump up and run. When it got there, under heavy fire, explosions going on around, it would stand there rock solid. They would pull the rounds off of it and put wounded men back on it, and she would take them back to the aid station without somebody guiding her.
Yeah,
That was reckless.
Yes, that was her. And if I remember right, they gave her an honorary gunnery sergeant.
She's an honorary sergeant?
She was an honorary sergeant in the Marine Corps and actually won medals.
Was decorated for
Was
bravery.
decorated for bravery under fire several times before they retired her.
There is a statue, I think, it's either in California or I think it's in California.
It's in California, San Diego. I think.
San Diego, they have a statue to that. I mean, a life-size statue of her carrying ammo. She loved her Marines,
Yeah.
you know. So yeah, but that's the type of thing that an animal that once you've raised it and trained it, and like I said, it's a beast of burden, but it's more like a pet. People see in movies and get the idea that people were very abusive, and I'm not going to say that they weren't people that did that. There are stupid people that abuse their cars today. But at the same time, you had invested so much time and effort in an oxen, in a mule or whatever. That was like your child. Somebody hit your mule, you're going to come unglued, you know, because you had so much time invested. If that animal goes down and dies, it just sets you back 2 to 3 years.
Oh yeah. Yeah, you've got the one that you use and you got one in training.
Yeah. You can't just walk over here and buy another one because that mule don't know you or that oxen don't know you, and it'll be a fight for the next year to get them to trust you.
They are not what they say, turnkey ready.
No.
Not at all.
Mm-mm.
But moving along, in a complete total grid down, meltdown situation, something like a goat or an oxen or even a mule. Now I understand you guys in the cities, does not apply, okay? Unless you've got a couple of acres in the city park and some friends who have the mule or the goat or something, it's gonna be hard for y'all to do that. But, you know, for our more rural viewers, it's doable. Even just with the goat, like you said, they'll haul 50 pounds of load easily.
And in life and death, you can eat them. You know, that's the horrible thing about it, but history is full of campaigns where when the mule died for whatever reason, you didn't bury him at the dinner for the next 2 days. Everybody, you know, and that would be hard. I remember reading about a buffalo soldier that was out west, and his horse, that he had rode that horse in the Civil War, had been a black soldier in the Civil War on the Union side, and ended up post out west and had the same horse. And when that horse finally died of disease, that the whole unit mourned because that horse was like a part of the family to them.
Yeah.
You know, I understand it. But then again, they cooked it too. You know, they mourned it, they cooked it, and
Put it to good use.
yeah, and the chaplain said prayers over it too. So, you know, it's just one of them. Life is hard when you're in those kind of situations. Well, anything else you want to add, brother?
Oh, there's just a whole waterfall of things rolling around, but that will be always 40.
Yeah, I mean, just
Oh yeah, I was thinking about it. We were talking earlier before we went on camera. I'm in contact with a couple who live up northwest of here, who have a micro farm, and if we can make things happen, there may be some episodes coming up on their micro farm, profiling their micro farm, kind of like we've done with Miss Lita, which we need to get back with her.
we got to get back with Miss Lita, and we got to do a soap thing.
Yeah. I've also got some seed to do the microgreens with. I would like to have her walk us through that first microgreen run.
And we got to do a little bit, now it's cooling off days, first cool fall day. We got to get in your kitchen and do a canning video.
Yeah.
At least something simple and easy.
Something very simple and easy.
Go to Walmart and buy them big bags of family.
I'm ahead of you, dude.
I know it's what I'm saying, so they know, and try doing it in small jars as you know, practicing, put up some squash or butter beans or whatever. as a practice. That way you ain't out a lot of money.
Right.
And you learn the skill is the same, you just scale it up or scale it down.
Homework. Go to your local Walmart or your big box and look in the canning section. It'll be home appliances. They'll have a section that's canning. Price you a pressure cooker. Go ahead and do that now. We're coming into the off season, the end of the season for that. So prices are gonna be lower. Select you a good canner, a pressure canner. I bought mine at Walmart, and I can use it as a water bath canner or as a pressure canner. Either way.
And start checking out your Goodwills and stuff like that
Yeah.
after Christmas, not
Yeah.
right now, but after Christmas, because Grandma got a brand new one and she chucks her old one.
Yes.
That's when they start showing up in Goodwill.
And to go back to another old ways, you can go to your county extension office and they will pressure test your lid.
And make
So-
sure it's good.
Yeah, so if you buy a secondhand canner, take the lid to the extension office in your county, and every county in the US has got one.
And they'll check it to make sure it's
They
safe.
they can pressure check it to make sure that it's safe. And when we do our canning videos, we're gonna be canning meat. I'm gonna tell you that up front. We're gonna be doing it, we're gonna be doing meat and vegetables. We did not make a lot of fruit this year. We had a long dry spell at exactly the wrong time.
Yep.
We didn't make any blueberries, we didn't make any figs, we didn't make any pecans. But next year, we didn't make any acorns either to speak of.
But they do. We need to go look and see if we got some American Beautyberry.
We do have beautyberry.
So
I've
we
seen
need to
beautyberry.
do that. So
It's
that was
not,
good.
yeah, it's not nearly as much as it was last year. But generally speaking, when you have an off year, you have an abundance the next year. So, those different things will be coming up. I think that's everything for right now.
Okay. Well, guys, thank you for watching. We greatly appreciate you doing it. And there'll be more videos coming up. Anything else, brother?
We're done.
Till next time, guys, I'm Blackie.
And Bear.
Wishing you safe journeys. Have a great day, guys.